The thing about small towns is that they have legends, and some legends have teeth. They bite down and hold on, passed down through generations like heirlooms. In Spooner, Wisconsin, population 2,400-ish, the legend of the Devil's Chair in Spooner Cemetery had been luring teenagers for over a century. I should know. I'm Joey Anderson, and that chair took a bite out of me that's still bleeding 30 years later. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the night that changed everything. The night that taught me some doors should never be opened, some dares should never be taken, and some sins should stay buried deeper than any corpse in Spooner's frozen ground. It was Halloween night, 1993. I was 17, invincible in the way only 17-year-olds can be, convinced that death was something that happened to other people. My friends and I had exhausted every other form of entertainment our little town had to offer. The bowling alley had closed at 9. The tiny movie theater was showing the same 3 films it had been showing since Labor Day. That's when Mark brought up the chair. I'm telling you guys, my older brother swore he saw Jimi Henderson walk out of that cemetery different than he walked in, and all he did was sit in that chair, Mark said, his breath forming white clouds in the October chill. We were huddled around the rusted remains of what used to be the playground behind the old elementary school, passing around a bottle of Southern Comfort. Mark was the instigator of our group, always pushing boundaries, always looking for the next thrill. He had the kind of restless energy that small towns breed in their brightest kids, the ones who know they're meant for something bigger but can't figure out how to get there. Jimmy's been weird since he was 12, Diane countered, taking a swig from the bottle and passing it to Tommy. That boy used to eat paste in 3rd grade. I'm not sure he's the best example of supernatural transformation. Diane was our skeptic, sharp-tongued and sharper-minded. She had plans, college, law school, a life beyond the confines of rural Spooner. Her red hair caught the streetlight like fire, and her green eyes held an intelligence that made some adults nervous. She was the one who usually talked us out of Mark's wilder schemes. But tonight something was different. Tonight, even she seemed hungry for something to happen. "Come on, Dee," Tommy said, his voice already slightly slurred from the whiskey. "Where's your sense of adventure?" Tommy was our gentle giant, 6'3", and built like the linebacker he'd been before he tore his knee junior year. Football had been his ticket out, and when that dream died, something had died in him too. And then there was me, Joey, the quiet one, the observer. I was the one who noticed when someone was having a bad day, who kept the group's secrets. I was also the one carrying the heaviest secret of all, though none of them knew it yet. "So what's the deal with this chair anyway?" I asked, though I already knew the legend by heart. Every kid in Spooner did. Mark leaned forward, his eyes glittering with excitement. "The old folks call it the Devil's Chair. It's a stone chair way back in the old section of the cemetery. They say if you sit in it at exactly midnight on Halloween night, you have to confess your worst sin out loud. And if you don't tell the truth, if you try to lie or hold back, something comes for you." "Something like what?" Diane asked. I could tell she was intrigued despite herself. "Nobody knows for sure," Mark continued. "Some say it's the devil himself. Others think it's some kind of demon that feeds on guilt. But everyone agrees on one thing. People who sit in that chair are never quite the same afterward." Tommy laughed, but it sounded forced. "That's just small-town bull. Probably some story made up to keep kids from vandalizing a cemetery with no caretaker." But I noticed he didn't meet any of our eyes when he said it. "There's only one way to find out," Mark said, and I could see the challenge forming in his mind. "One of us sits in the chair, at midnight, tonight." The words hung in the air between us like a noose waiting for a neck. "That's stupid," Diane said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Dangerous stupid or boring stupid?" Mark asked with a grin. "The dangerous kind," she admitted. "Then we're doing it," Mark declared. "Question is, who's got the balls?" And that's when I made the mistake that would haunt the rest of my life. Maybe it was the whiskey, or maybe it was the guilt I'd been carrying around like a tumor for 3 years. Whatever it was, I heard myself saying, "I'll do it." The words surprised even me. I wasn't the brave one in our group, wasn't the leader or the risk taker. But something about the challenge called to me, whispered to the dark thing that had been growing inside me since that terrible day when I was 14. Joey? Diane looked at me with concern. You sure?
Hell yeah, he's sure, Mark said, slapping me on the back. Joey's got more guts than any of us gave him credit for.
But Tommy was studying my face in the dim light, and I could see the worry in his eyes. Tommy knew me better than the others, had been my best friend since kindergarten. He could sense when something was eating at me, even if he didn't know what. You don't have to prove anything, man, he said quietly. I'm not trying to prove anything, I lied. I'm just curious. The truth was more complicated. The truth was that I'd been running from something for 3 years, and I was tired of running. Maybe I thought facing the devil's chair would somehow balance the scales, would give me the punishment I'd been avoiding. Or maybe I was just 17 and stupid, and full of liquid courage. Either way, we were going to Spooner Cemetery. The cemetery sat on a hill overlooking the river, its wrought iron gates twisted into shapes that looked ominous even in daylight. At night, with October wind rattling the bare branches of the old oaks, it looked like something out of a nightmare. We parked Tommy's beat-up Camaro at the bottom of the hill and walked up the winding path, our footsteps crunching on fallen leaves. The moon was nearly full, casting everything in silver and shadow. Headstones jutted from the ground like broken teeth, and of course, somewhere in the distance, an owl called out. This is some horror movie stuff right here, Diane muttered, but she kept walking. The devil's chair sat in the oldest section of the cemetery, where the headstones were so weathered you couldn't read the names anymore. It was carved from black granite, simple and stark, with armrests that curved like embracing arms. Nobody remembered who had put it there or why. Dang, Tommy breathed. It's bigger than I thought it would be. The chair loomed before us, easily 6 feet tall, its surface polished smooth by decades of wind and sandy soil. In the moonlight, it looked almost alive, as if it were pulsing. Still time to back out, Diane said, but she was looking at me with something that might have been respect. I checked my watch. 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until midnight. 13 minutes until I either proved the legend was just small-town nonsense or opened a door I might not be able to close. I'm doing this, I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Mark whooped with excitement, but Tommy grabbed my arm. Joey, seriously, you don't have to. Yeah, I do, I said, and for the first time in 3 years, I was telling the complete truth. We passed the bottle as the minutes crawled by. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, could feel sweat forming on my palms despite the October chill. Around us, the whole cemetery seemed to hold its breath, as if even the dead were waiting to see what would happen. At 11:59, I walked to the chair and placed my hands on its cold stone arms. The granite was smooth as glass and warm to the touch, which should have been impossible on a night this cold. This is pointless, Diane called out to nobody in particular. I looked back at my 3 best friends, Mark excited and expectant, Diane worried but trying to hide it, Tommy looking like he wanted to tackle me and drag me away from the chair. These were the people who knew me best in the world, who had been there through every triumph and disaster of my teenage years. They were also the people I'd been lying to for 3 years. I'm sure, I said. The church bells in town began to toll midnight. I sat down in the devil's chair. At first, nothing happened. Relief with a touch of disappointment washed over me. I waited, counting the 12 chimes of the church bells. And when the last note faded into silence, I began to think maybe the whole thing really was just small-town story, and felt silly for almost believing. Then the temperature dropped. Not gradually, like a weather front moving in, but all at once, as if someone had opened a freezer door. My breath began forming clouds, and I could see frost forming on the headstones around us. Holy cow, Mark whispered. You guys feel that? But I barely heard him. Something was happening inside my head, a pressure building like water behind a dam. And then, impossibly, I heard a voice that wasn't quite a voice, felt words that weren't quite words. Tell me your sin. The command hit me like a physical blow. My mouth opened without my permission, and words began spilling out. I cheated on my SATs, I said. I looked at Jenny Morrison's answers during the math section. The words hung in the cold air, and I waited for something to happen. But the pressure in my head only intensified, and that voice spoke again. That is not your sin. Around me, my friends were backing away from the chair. I could see terror on their faces, could see Tommy reaching for me, but it was like watching them through thick glass. They seemed impossibly far away. I stole $20 from my mom's purse last month. I tried again. That is not your sin. The cold was spreading through my body now, starting from where my skin touched the stone and radiating outward like ice water in my veins. My teeth began to chatter, but not from the cold. The fear was something else entirely, something primal and absolute. And then I felt it, a presence behind the chair, something vast and hungry and ancient. I couldn't turn around to look. My body was frozen in place. But I could feel it there, waiting, and I knew with terrible certainty that it could see straight through me, could see every secret I'd ever hidden, every lie I'd ever told, every moment of shame I'd tried to bury. Tell me your sin, Joseph Anderson, or I will take it from you along with everything else. The presence pressed closer, and suddenly I could smell something like sulfur and burned meat. My friends were shouting now, but their voices sounded like they were coming from far away. Tommy was pulling at my arm, trying to drag me from the chair, but I might as well have been carved from the same stone. And then, like a dam bursting, the truth came pouring out. I killed my little sister! The words exploded from my lips with such force that I tasted blood. I killed Sarah! The silence that followed was deafening. Even the wind had stopped. Mark, Diane, and Tommy stared at me in shock. They knew I'd had a little sister, knew she died when I was 14, but we'd never talked about how. I told them it was an accident, that she'd fallen down the stairs while I was supposed to be watching her. That had been true, as far as it went. But it wasn't the whole truth. I pushed her, I continued, the words coming now like vomit, unstoppable and burning. She was 7 years old, and she was being bratty, and I was angry because I wanted to go out with my friends instead of babysitting, and she wouldn't leave me alone. She kept asking me to play with her, kept tugging on my shirt, and I shoved her away from me, hard. She went backward down the stairs, and her neck. I was sobbing now, 3 years of buried guilt pouring out of me like blood from a wound. I told everyone she fell, that it was an accident. Mom was at work, Dad was at the bar like always, and nobody saw. Just me and Sarah. And I let everyone think it was just bad luck, just one of those terrible things that happen. But I killed her. I killed my baby sister because I was selfish and angry, and I wanted her to leave me alone. The presence behind the chair seemed to lean closer, and I could feel its satisfaction like heat from a furnace. This was what it had been waiting for. This raw, poisonous truth that I'd been carrying like a cancer. Yes, the voice whispered. That is your sin. And then something reached into me. Not physical hands, but something far worse. And I felt it tear a piece of my soul away like ripping pages from a book. The pain was indescribable. Not physical, but somehow deeper, more fundamental. It was the pain of having something essential stolen, something that could never be replaced. I screamed. The world went white, then black, and I knew no more. I woke up in Tommy's car, wrapped in someone's jacket, with the taste of copper in my mouth and the worst headache of my life pounding behind my eyes. Diane was in the front passenger seat, turned around to watch me with worried eyes.
Mark was driving, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. "What happened?" I asked, though even as the words left my mouth I remembered everything. The chair, the presence, the confession. The truth I'd finally told. "You screamed and passed out," Tommy said quietly. He was sitting beside me in the back seat, and I could see the concern in his face. "We carried you back to the car. Joey, what you said back there was true," I finished for him. Every word. We drove in silence for a while. I kept waiting for them to ask questions, to demand details, to tell me I was a monster. But they didn't. Maybe they were too shocked, or maybe they understood that some truths are too heavy to be picked apart with questions. Finally, Diane spoke. "You were just a kid, Joey. 14 years old. Kids do stupid things." "I killed her," I said. "You made a mistake," Tommy said firmly. "A terrible, awful mistake. But you were a kid, and you were angry, and you didn't mean for her to get hurt." But even as he said it, I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Because we all knew that intentions don't bring back the dead, that good kids don't push their little sisters downstairs, no matter how angry they get. Mark pulled up in front of my house, the same house where it had happened, where my parents still lived with the ghost of their youngest daughter. The same house I'd been trying to escape for 3 years but couldn't, because running away wouldn't bring Sarah back. "Are we good?" I asked as I got out of the car. "After tonight, I mean. After what I told you." They exchanged glances, and I could see them making a decision. These were my best friends, the people who'd known me longest, and they were choosing whether to stand by me or cut me loose. "We're okay," Diane said finally. "We're all okay." But I knew that wasn't true. I could see it in their eyes, could feel the change in the air between us. The confession had poisoned everything, just like I'd always known it would. I went inside, crept up to my room, and lay down on my bed without turning on the lights. The darkness felt different now, heavier somehow, as if it were pressing down on me. And somewhere in that darkness, I could swear I felt eyes watching me. The devil's chair had taken my confession, had ripped away that piece of my soul, but I had the sinking feeling that our business wasn't finished. The presence I'd felt behind the chair, it had marked me somehow, claimed me. And I was right. The nightmare started that very night. In my dreams, I was back in the cemetery, sitting in the devil's chair. But this time, I wasn't alone. Sarah was there, my 7-year-old sister, standing in front of me in the white dress my mother had buried her in. Her neck was bent at an impossible angle, and her eyes were black holes that seemed to pull at my sanity. "Why did you push me, Joey?" she asked, her voice echoing as if she were speaking from the bottom of a well. "Why did you kill me?" "I'm sorry," I would try to say, but no words would come out. My mouth moved soundlessly while she stared at me with those horrible, empty eyes. "You can't be sorry," she continued. "Sorry doesn't make me alive again. Sorry doesn't give me back my childhood, my teenage years, my wedding day, my children. Sorry is just a word you use to make yourself feel better." And then she would smile, but her smile wasn't quite right, and it would grow beyond proportion until I would try, unsuccessfully, to scream. That's when I would wake up, gasping and covered in sweat, with the taste of graveyard dirt in my mouth. The dreams came every night for weeks. Sometimes Sarah was alone. Sometimes she was with that presence, that hungry thing that had taken a piece of my soul. During the day, things weren't much better. My friends tried to act normal around me, but I could see the change in their eyes. The easy camaraderie we'd shared was gone, replaced by careful politeness and uncomfortable silences. They knew my secret now, knew what kind of person I really was, and even though they tried to be understanding, I could feel them pulling away. Mark stopped calling with plans for weekend adventures. Diane found excuses not to study together anymore. Tommy still hung around,
but our conversations felt forced, like we were both reading from scripts. At home, my parents noticed the change in me, the dark circles under my eyes, the way I jumped at sudden noises, the way I avoided the staircase where Sarah had died. My mother tried to talk to me about it, her eyes full of maternal concern. "You've been having nightmares," she said one morning over breakfast. "I can hear you calling out in your sleep." "Just stress," I lied. "Senior year, you know, college applications." But she knew there was more to it. Mothers always know. She'd lost one child already. She was terrified of losing another, even if she didn't understand to what. Weeks passed. Halloween became Thanksgiving, then Christmas, then New Year's. The nightmares continued, and my waking hours became a gray blur of exhaustion and anxiety. My grades slipped, my college applications went unfinished, and my parents grew more worried with each passing day. It was in late January that things came to a head. I was walking to the park to get some air. My friends had all but abandoned me by then, unable to handle the weight of my secret when I saw her. Sarah, my dead sister, standing at the corner of College and Oak Street in broad daylight. She looked exactly as she had in my dreams. 7 years old, wearing her burial dress, her neck twisted at that sickening angle. But this time, she wasn't alone. Other figures stood with her. Children, teenagers, adults, all with the same empty black eyes, all staring at me with that terrible knowing expression. Sarah smiled as I drew near, her dead eyes focused on me. "Hello, Joey," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the street despite the traffic noise. "He wants to see you." "Who?" I asked, though I already knew. "The one who lives in the chair, the one you gave your confession to. He's been waiting for you to come back." "I'm not going back there," I said, aware that I was talking to empty air as far as anyone else could see. A few passers-by gave me strange looks, probably thinking I was talking on a hands-free phone or just crazy. "You don't have a choice," Sarah continued. "You belong to him now. Part of you, anyway. The part he took that night. And he's hungry for the rest." I walked at a furious pace and locked myself in my room, pulling the curtains closed and trying to convince myself that I was having some kind of breakdown. Stress-induced hallucinations, a nervous breakdown, anything but the truth. But when I opened my curtains that night, Sarah was standing in my backyard, looking up at my window, and she stayed there until dawn, never moving, never blinking, just watching. The next few days were a blur of terror and exhaustion. The dead followed me everywhere, to school, to the grocery store, even into my own house. Only I could see them, but their presence was constant, oppressive, like living under the weight of the ocean. Sarah was always among them, my 7-year-old sister with her broken neck and her knowing smile. Sometimes she would speak to me, always with the same message. He was waiting for me. The thing in the devil's chair wanted me to come back. It was Tommy who finally forced the issue. He showed up at my house on a Saturday morning, looking like he hadn't slept much either. The easy friendship between us was gone, poisoned by the truth I'd told in the cemetery, but he was still concerned enough to try one more time. "You look like hell," he said when I answered the door. "Thanks. You too." He studied my face, taking in the dark circles, the hollow cheeks, the paranoid way I kept glancing over his shoulder. "This is about that night, isn't it? About what happened at the cemetery?" I laughed, but it came out sounding more like a sob. "You think I'm crazy." "I think you're haunted," he said quietly. "And I think whatever you woke up that night isn't done with you yet." The simple honesty of it hit me like a physical blow. Here was someone who believed me, who understood that the devil's chair had been more than just legend. "I can see them," I whispered. "The dead. They're everywhere, Tommy. They follow me around, and they all have the same message. He wants me to come back." Tommy was quiet for a long moment, digesting this. Then he asked the question I'd been dreading. "Are you going to go?" I looked past him to the street, where Sarah stood waiting with her usual crowd of the dead. She waved at me with a child's enthusiasm, as if we were playing a game instead of dancing around my sanity. "I don't think I have a choice," I said. We went that night. Tommy insisted on coming with me, though I tried to talk him out of it. "You don't understand," I told him. "This thing, whatever it is, it's not just some ghost or urban legend. It's something else, something hungry and ancient and wrong. I can feel it pulling at me even now." "All the more reason you shouldn't go alone," he replied stubbornly. So we drove to the cemetery just as we had 3 months earlier. But this time, there was no excited chatter, no liquid courage, no sense of adventure. The cemetery looked different in the winter moonlight. Snow covered the headstones like burial shrouds, and the bare trees reached toward the sky like skeletal fingers. But the path to the devil's chair was clear, as if something had melted the snow away. The chair itself was exactly as I remembered it. Black granite, smooth, radiating a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. But now I could see other things too. Shadows that moved independently of their sources, whispers in languages I didn't recognize, and a darkness behind the chair that seemed to pulse with its own malevolent life. "Wow," Tommy breathed. "You can feel it, can't you? Even from here." I could. The presence was stronger now, more focused, like a searchlight that had finally found its target. It had been waiting for me, had known I would return. Sarah stepped out from behind the chair, still 7 years old, still wearing her burial dress. But now she looked more solid, more real, as if the thing in the chair was giving her substance. "Hello, Joey," she said, and her voice was exactly as I remembered it from when she was alive, high and sweet and innocent. "I knew you'd come back." "What do you want?" I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew. "He wants the rest," she said, gesturing toward the chair. "The part of you he didn't take the first time. Your guilt has been feeding him, making him stronger, but he's still hungry. And if I don't give it to him?" Sarah's expression grew sad, and for a moment she looked like the little girl I remembered instead of the vengeful spirit she'd become. "Then he'll take it anyway, and everyone you care about will suffer for it." As if to demonstrate her point, more figures began emerging from the shadows around us. I recognized some of them. Mrs. Henderson from down the street, who'd died in a car accident last year. Billy Martinez, who'd overdosed behind the high school. Others were strangers, but they all had the same empty black eyes. And standing among them, looking terrified and confused, were 3 figures I recognized all too well. Mark, Diane, and a version of Tommy that wasn't quite right. His eyes slightly too wide, his skin slightly too pale. "No," I said, backing away from the chair. "They're not dead. They're not part of this." "They are now," Sarah said with that terrible child smile. "He's been watching them through you, learning about them, marking them. If you don't give him what he wants, he'll take them instead. And it will be your fault, just like I was your fault." The thing behind the chair stirred, and I felt its attention focus on me like the heat from a blast furnace. The voice spoke in my head. "Choose, Joseph Anderson. Give me what remains of your soul, or watch me take theirs." I looked at my friends, or whatever they were becoming, and saw the truth in their faces. They were caught in this now, trapped by their association with me, their presence that Halloween night. The entity in the chair had marked them through me, and if I didn't sacrifice myself, it would claim them instead. It was Sarah all over again. My choices, my actions, leading to someone else's destruction. "I'll sit in the chair," I said quietly. "But you let them go.
You let everyone go." "Agreed," the presence whispered, and I could feel its satisfaction like oily smoke in my lungs. I walked toward the devil's chair, each step feeling like it might be my last. Tommy tried to stop me, grabbing my arm, but his hand passed right through me. The chair was warm to the touch, welcoming almost. I sat down and felt that familiar cold spreading through my body. But this time it was different. This time, it felt final. "Tell me what you are," the presence commanded. "I'm a killer," I said without hesitation. "I killed my sister. I killed Sarah. And now I'm killing myself to save these people." "Yes," the voice said with satisfaction. "That is what you are." And then it reached into me again, not just tearing away another piece of my soul, but taking everything that remained. I felt myself being hollowed out, consumed, my essence feeding the hungry thing that lived in the stone chair. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was Tommy reaching for me, eyes wide with terror and perhaps comprehension. I woke up in a hospital bed 2 days later. The doctor said Tommy had brought me in, hypothermic and barely breathing. They said I'd been raving about devils and chairs and dead children, that I'd had what appeared to be a complete psychotic break. My parents were there, looking older and more worried than I'd ever seen them. They'd called in specialists, psychiatrists, people who could help me work through whatever trauma had caused my breakdown. But I knew the truth. The devil's chair had taken what it wanted from me, not just my guilt over Sarah's death, but something fundamental, something that made me who I was. I was alive, but I was also empty, hollowed out, a walking shadow of the person I used to be. My friends visited once. Mark, Diane, and Tommy, all very much alive and unharmed, all treating me with the careful politeness reserved for the mentally ill. They remembered that Halloween night, but only the normal parts. The drinking, the dare, my confession, my collapse. The supernatural elements, the presence in the chair. None of that had been real for them. Only I remembered the truth. Only I carried the weight of what had really happened. They tried to be supportive, tried to act like our friendship could survive what I told them about Sarah. But I could see the discomfort in their eyes, the way they didn't quite know how to act around someone who'd confessed to killing his own sister. Eventually, they stopped visiting altogether. That was 30 years ago. I'm 47 now, married to a woman who doesn't know about my past, father to 2 children who will never know they have a father who killed their aunt. I've built a new life, constructed a careful facade of normalcy over the hollow place where my soul used to be. I killed my sister Sarah when I was 14 years old. I confessed it to a demon when I was 17. And I've been dying from it ever since. One hollow day at a time, carrying the weight of what I did and what I became. That's my story. That's my warning. Stay away from the devil's chair in that old cemetery. Some legends have teeth, and some things are hungry for more than just your secrets. They're hungry for your soul.